In this video, I'm going to show you how I make these individual nut bowls. It might be just the gift you're looking for someone special this Christmas. I consider these an advanced project because of the work that you need to do to cut the feet. It's a very tight angle in here. The timber I'm using is from a Quila or Mabu fence post or veranda post, where I've cut them at about 52 mil long. That will end up with the bowl being about half the 90 mil width. I've wrapped some some cloth tape around it to protect it because I'm now going to mount it in the jaws, and the cloth tape will help protect the jaws from marking the timber. The tools I'll be using are a bowl gouge and spindle gouges. I'll be showing that although I prefer to use the bowl gouge for this work, that is in fact spindle work because the grain is running along the lathe, I just feel personally that I get a better cut out of the bowl gouge, and I'll show both methods in the video. I'll also be using a parting tool simply to mark where I'm starting the inside of the bowl, and the finishing tools to complete the bottom of the bowl will be scrapers. To determine the depth of the bowl, I like using the Kreg multi-mark. It just gives me a flat edge to put along the bowl as well as testing the depth, and it has markings on it if I need to go to a particular depth. This one is already set to the depth I want the inside of the bowl to be. So, mounting it, the jaws I've got here are on a standard chuck. They're the 130 mil diameter jaws, the JS 130Ns, and that allows me to open it up sufficiently to grip this 90 mil square piece of timber. As always, when you're putting something into the jaws, you tighten it from both sides. The mechanical mechanism within the jaws just will tighten it, so that's nipped up, but when I go around to the other side, there is still movement. So once you're happy that that's sitting nice and steady, we're ready to go. Bring the tool rest up nice and tight. I'm going to start with the tool rest on centre line because the first thing I'm going to do is use a pair of calipers to mark the inside of the recess. That is set at 68 mil. The reason I've got it at that size is that later on I'm going to be reversing the piece into a standard set of jaws, and 68 mil is inside the outside gripping of a standard set of Nova jaws. Because of the tight work that I'll be doing later on to cut the feet on this, it is essential that you do wear a face mask for this project, because things can go wrong. In this example here, I was turning a very nice larger little nut dish, and I was inattentive when I withdrew the tool from within the work, had a nice little catch, and the result was a fractured piece. So you must wear a face mask. So first up, let's mark that size for the inside of the bulb section. When you're ever using a caliper, always only touch with the left-hand side, because if you touch with the right-hand side, it's going to flip over and potentially come across and be quite dangerous. So I don't need very fast speed for doing this. Around the 500 should be fine. So I've turned the speed down on the lathe, checked that it's clear of the tool rest. So I'll touch that left-hand edge, estimating where I'll make a circle. You can see that I'm actually too far out because of the distance from the point to the scribed circle on the right-hand side. So I need to halve that distance and come across and touch again. They now match, so therefore I have the correct location of where that dimension is. I'm now going to use the parting tool just to make an indent in there, nice square indent. Move the tool rest away a little bit and drop it down. I'm doing that to help ensure that I don't go outside that dimension that I've set, because I want that dimension to stay as it is for gripping in the jaws other jaws later. I'm also going to set the outside section of the bowl, because I want that little recess to be there and create that bead effect on the top. So let's mark where that would be as well. Now moving on to the bowl gouge or spindle gouge. I will use the spindle gouge first just so you can see what the difference might be. Same technique as I'll use with the bowl gouge. The tool orientation is that the bevel will be rubbing the timber first. I'm sighting the top wing to a line that's about 3 mil in from the bottom wing, and that allows me to create a cut but keep the unsupported part of the tool away from the timber. And then I can sweep it into the middle. Whenever I'm turning into the middle, even though it might be taking it all out, I have a preference to come from the top and sweep into the bottom of the middle, and that prevents to help the tear out that you often get in the middle of a turned item. One more with the spindle gouge. Okay, so that's the spindle gouge. Now, even though I'm cutting into the end grain, I am still getting shavings coming off the tool because I'm cutting across and into the grain. Let's see how the bowl gouge goes in a similar sort of cut. So what is the difference with the bowl gouge? The bowl gouge, it has more meat in the construction of it, so whether that's the reason I think I get a better cut, and hopefully you'll see that it actually will cut quicker and cleaner. So that did go through the cut a lot quicker than the spindle gouge did, so I'm going to persist with this bowl gouge. I'm going to be gripping this later in a standard set of jaws, so I want an undercut right at the rim there so those jaws will grip properly. And that's why I need to be quite a long way from my body in doing this cut. So I'm trying to make sure I use the bevel all the time to support the cutting edge. I'd increase the speed of the lathe a little bit. The faster that you can have the lathe going, the quicker the timber comes onto the cuts. So the tool is skipping across there at that point because I'm going so steep in there that it's not able to contact the bevel real easily. Let's see how we're going with that undercut though. Yep, we definitely have an undercut now. Let's see how we're going with our depth. Yep, still have, I don't know, maybe 10 mil to go. With the scraper, I like to have the tool rest away a little bit. Set the height to the centre line of the piece. I'll use with a scraper is to hold it with my hand underneath. That allows me to grip the tool from above, and then I can sweep across with my fingers and get quite a nice shape on the bottom, holding the back of the tool in line with the bed of the lathe. And by having the tool rest starting on centre height, when I raise the handle so that the tool is pointing down, I am contacting the timber on centre height. So I'm wiggling the tool around the centre line of the piece to pick up that centre point before I sweep it out to create the cut. Right, we're there. Now we're ready to sand that inside and keep going from there. For sanding, I run the lathe at about 700 RPM. That allows the paper to work in its most efficient way. And with sandpaper, the grit that you start off with is doing all the work, and subsequent grits from those are just taking out the sanding marks. And the basic principle is whatever you start out with, in this case 80, halve the number and add it on. So the next grit will be 120, it's 180, 240, etc. So moving my hand all the time so the paper's not in a stationary position at any one particular point in the process. Moving on through the grits. We'll keep going up to about 400. So that's done. So now before I move on, I'll cut that little bead on the top, and there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can use a spindle gouge, which takes a bit more practice, but here's a simple way where you can use a skew chisel to make a bead. Basically we're going to use the skew chisel as a negative rake scraper, so the tool is going to be at a rest is going to be around the centre height, which is fine. I'm going to lay it flat on the tool rest, bring the point in on one side and rock it to the centre, bring it round from the other side and bring it back to the centre as well, and that will round over that edge. Of course, we're needing to make sure that the tool is pointing down a little bit. And now I have a bead. I'll just give that a little sand. And depending upon how you wish to finish it, might be you'd like to finish on the lathe. In this example, I'm going to be using a product that I can use off the lathe, the Evolution products. And I'll show how you can use this without needing to have the piece on the lathe. The advantage to this is it allows you to move the piece to another location while it's in between coats, and therefore you can move on to other turning. So what I'll be doing now is, before I remove this and reverse it, I need to start shaping this outside section so that we have the outside of the feet. And to do that, I'll be using my bowl gouge again. And you must cut down the hill, as we often call it, so we're cutting across the grain, not into it. If you start trying to turn up into the hill, all this will flick out and you'll have a nasty bit of timber that will go flying off and ruin the piece. So we'll start from there and move out. So we're going to be cutting fairly close to the jaws, and again we need to be just watching what we're doing with all parts of the tool, not just where it's contacting the timber. So the tool rest is going to be very close to the jaws of the chuck. So like in any turning, you always make sure you spin it by hand to make sure it's going to clear of the work. The tool rest is slightly below centre line, and I'm going to be using the bowl gouge to cut downhill so that I get a nice smooth surface on these corners. If I try and come this direction, I'm cutting up the hill, and that will all tear out and create quite a nasty connection on the corner. So sweeping in close to the jaws and going out towards where that rim is located. Because there's a lot of air that you're cutting and it can be awkward to see where you're going, it's always nice to rub the bevel before you start the cut. Then you can't have it dig in. You can see that I'm getting quite a nice little surface there with the tool, and we'll keep going from there. It's always a good idea to stop halfway through and just see how your progress is. Right. Again, working through all the grits up to about 400. Here we go with the 240. One will be 320. And the last one is 400. We don't need to go any further on this particular work. We'll get very nice finish with up to 400, and then the finish we'll put on after will give us a nice looking vessel. So that's done. So let's now move on and look at how we're going to shape the inside of these legs. And to do that, I'm going to remove it from this jaws and remount it with standard jaws. So previously we had the cloth tape on the wood to protect it against the large jaws. This time we're mounting it onto the jaws in this manner, and so I've put the tape onto the jaws itself so I can expand it into there. As we've said previously, I've undercut this so it'll allow the jaws to grip nice and firmly. And we've left it at that 68mm inside diameter of the bowl to allow for the jaws to open successfully on the inside like that. Now we've mounted in the lathe. I think I had to have this section here quite large for the grip on those jaws I had. To me that's too big a foot, so we're going to reduce that by about half. So I'll put it there, drop the tool rest down a little bit, and I'm just going to use the bowl gouge to cut through there and take some of that excess off. Same tool orientations we had before, handle down, bevels pointing in the direction of the cut, and I can see a little bit of the lower wing in line with the top wing. Speed of the lathe is going to be up at around that 1700 RPM. And because I'm cutting into air, I need to be careful where I bring the tool in because there isn't a lot of visibility, and just carefully bring it in till I make contact before I make the cut. So now we need to look at how we're going to cut this undersection in here. It's quite a tight cut, so we need to make sure that we're conscious of where all parts of the tool is, not just the cutting edge. So let's mark the outside corners. It's going to be around this area is where our corners need to end up. And the base section, we've tapered the inside of the bowl so we have a fair bit of room on the bottom. It will be in the area of around here. We need this section in here to be lower or recessed in compared to the feet, so that it's the feet that's going to be where the bowl rests on. So again, we're going to use the bowl gouge to make these sort of cuts. I'm going to start up here and just come in a little bit so I can trim off that bottom. So that part is now lower than the other part, so we're all good. Just drop that tool rest a little bit further. Now I need to start cutting this recess for the feet. And the outside of the feet are going to end up being around here. So we're going to be sweeping in and watching at all times where the top wing and the bottom wing of the tool are, because there's an easy chance we could contact the wrong part we don't want and cause a massive catch. But at the same time, as we're going in, by carefully doing a cut and coming across to the other side and dropping the handle right down, we can turn the inside part into a shear cut. And so we can do some of it in one single pass. Let's see how that works now. I can also, and I'll be doing this quite regularly, I'll be coming in from there and sweeping in both directions. I'll be constantly changing the direction I'm doing the cut. Now, because this is quite a tight area, I'm going to switch to a 1/4 inch bowl gouge. This bowl gouge has more of a fingernail grind, which will allow me to get into the tighter areas. But being away from the tool rest more, it's going to vibrate a little bit more, so there could be a bit more noise off it. I would like to move the tool rest a little bit closer to the work to help reduce that vibration, but I need to be conscious of where those corners are. My hand is sitting here, it's very close to those corners, and we don't want to contact them, it would be quite nasty. So in doing these cuts, I need to come in quite steep. So I am starting to cut a fair way from the body to get in there and then sweeping it in there. So now it's time to do lots of little cuts coming from both directions to get meat in the middle of that upper part. You can hear that there's a lot of noise when I'm out near the base of the feet because of all that air. And again, this tool with its sweep back allows me to just rub that bevel a bit better and go in nice and steep. A little bit more to go. What we're looking for is an even distance across this section here all the way around. So as I'm getting closer down, I've still got a ways to go, but I can always make sure I'm not going too far by checking that these calipers that have been set to the inside of the size, that I'm not going too close to the inside. Okay, looking nice and even there. Quite deep. Now, because I was taking such a fine cut, I've got a fairly good surface in there, because we really don't want to do much sanding there, if any. If we can get away without sanding in there, all the better. But I'll show you what I do for a bit of sanding in this area. So I'll move the tool rest away. I'll drop the speed down to about the 700 mark. Now, what we're needing to do, we have a fair bit of gap there, so we need to not have our finger right at the end of the sandpaper. We won't get it all the way in without being dangerous. So we're going to let the sandpaper bulk up by wrapping it a number of times. And that allows me to give a bit of pressure that I can put onto this cloth back paper to get into that finer area. And carefully edge the paper in the direction of rotation. As you can see, it will jump out if you're not careful, but my fingers aren't actually in the recess. Same on the other part of it. And then once again, we just work through the grits, doing that principle, keeping your fingers right out of that, inside that area. So now that it's finished, the only other part of the sanding will be to get rid of that tight edge that's around the cut on the inside. Bit of sanding there so it rounds over, and now it's ready to be taken off the lathe and apply the finish that I'd be looking to do, or if you're wishing to finish it on the lathe, now's the time to apply it. We don't want the dust to be impeding in the finish, so make sure either wipe it off or potentially blow it off would be even better, or a combination of both. And the product that I'm going to use is from Whittle, called Evolution, and the gloss finish in this instance. I recently came to using this product and quite happy with it. If you're looking at a lot of the information, a lot of it's related to use on the flooring. So it can imply that you need to wait overnight for it to dry before you put your second coat on. Yesterday I did a bowl with this on it in the middle of the rain, so quite humid, and I found that it was touch dry after about half an hour, which allowed me then to put that second coat on. So paper towel is a good medium for applying a finish, or flannel off an old pair of PJs or something similar. Don't need a very big piece. In doing finishes, I like to wear gloves. So I have these gloves that I will use. Keeps my hands nice and clean. When I find all my 5 fingers, because I do have 5 fingers still. So I'm just going to liberally apply it first up, and then we'll wipe off any excess after we've done. So quite a lot of product on the cloth to work it around. In there it can be a bit awkward to get in there with something else, so if you have trouble getting into the tight corners, brush it in. So that's an easy way to get into that little tight spot there. Then go around again with my paper towel. Just whack it all in there. At the moment I'm not concerned about how thick or thin I'm putting it, but as with most finishes, less is better. So now I've got that liberally coated, I'm just going to carefully wipe off any of that excess. So that's nice and coated, nice and even, and within half an hour that'll be touch dry. I can put a second coat in. So we've got some product now on a brush. What are you going to do with it? Well, there is various cleaning solutions you can use, but basically just terps will do the job. So I'll just clean the brush up in terps. So give that until it feels dry. Yesterday we had rain and I did one in the rain, and first coat came up quite shiny in itself. Potentially I might go over that with some 400 grit before I put the second coat on, but in this instance that feels pretty good as it is, and I could put that second coat on almost straight away. And there we have a gloss finish with a little individual nut bowl. Thank you for watching.